Welcome to the Health Catalyst podcast, brought to you by YPO. Here we talk about the business of health innovation, and I sit down with industry leaders who are in the trenches. My goal is to share the lessons and provide practical and actionable advice to help you launch and grow your business. Today, my guest is Punit Soni, founder and CEO of Suki. Suki, it's an AI solution which listens to patient conversations and automatically generates clinical documentation. I am your host, Rodrigo Hutt. Punit, thank you so much for being here today and welcome to the podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great having you on the show. So I've attended a few industry events recently, and everyone is talking about AI and Gen AI. However, when I speak with providers and physicians, they tell me that AI seems great, but maybe for the future, because today they said, if you really want to help me as a physician or as a provider, you should really pay attention to two of my biggest pain points. And they said, and I asked, so what are your two biggest pain points? And then they said, number one, it's clinician burnout, and the second one, it's labor shortages. So what I want to do right now, very quickly, I wanna share with you a recent survey. Can you see my screen, Puneet?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is a recent survey by Medscape, and they conducted interviews with over 10,000 physicians to explore the topic of physician burnout and depression. You can look at this report; it has a lot of data. I'm just gonna real quick. I'm just gonna show a couple of charts. And on here we can see that around 50% of physicians are burnt out.
Wow.
And around of 20% are depressed.
Wow.
And you can see the trend line here. Then, and here you can see some comments from the survey. Job stress, as the biggest, issue. And it says it takes me around 12 hours a day at work just to keep my head above water, plus working 3-4 hours each day on weekends. And then the final one that I want to share with you today is this one. What contributes most to your burnout? And the number one cause of burnout is too many bureaucratic tasks, paperwork, and so on. So with that, I want to stop sharing my screen, and I want to talk about Suki. So as I understand it, Suki, it's an AI assistant for clinicians. So Punit, let's I want to start by just asking you about what is talk about Suki's vision and how you came about this company. I think you started it like 7 years ago or so.
Yeah, no, the biggest public health crisis in this country that few people talk about is clinician burnout. And most people outside of healthcare and intellectually curious like you don't actually recognize this today. We have taken the most professional, sophisticated cadre of folks around us in these doctors and converted them into data clerks who basically just spend time kind of manipulating data, clicking boxes, checking things, etc. That's why the numbers that you show, make a lot of sense. I think the one that even I was surprised by was the level of depression. I mean, one thing, burnout, the other thing is depression. These are successful people. They are people who have done like some incredible work in their education and are in positions where they are actually able to help people, and they're depressed. That's something that as a society we should worry about. I think there's a few different contributing factors to this, and then we can line it up to the vision behind the company. One is that first and foremost, technology hasn't really done has not been as useful to healthcare as its promise has been. We keep saying healthcare tech, and effectively 95% of the companies that come in healthcare tech spend time actually figuring out how to create like 2 to 5% efficiency in some revenue cycle management thing, which will create like 100 million recurring revenue business. But they're not really actually fundamentally trying to help change the lives of the people who are key stakeholders in this, patients or clinicians or doctors at this point. And so when I had finished my, gig at Google and gone back to India and worked as a chief product officer of Flipkart, which was India's largest e-commerce company. Once we sold that to Walmart, or at least it was clear we will, had come back. And I had a couple of different guardrails or guidelines for myself to think about what I was going to do next. Number one was I wanted to start something from scratch, exercise muscles that I hadn't exercised before. Number two, I wanted to do something where there would be a clear value to society, measurable and direct value to society. Number three, I wanted to do something where time would become an advantage. The ability to spend time on a problem for a really extended period of time can be a really powerful advantage if you actually can organize your company according to that. And so all of those things led me to looking at healthcare tech. Now, I'm a technologist, not a clinician, so there is no way I can actually impact what the clinical side of healthcare directly. But technology, I can. I understand a little bit about that. And so then you start looking at this space as an outsider and you see these numbers. 88% of all doctors do not recommend their own profession to their own kids. The unbelievable amount of labor shortage in every aspect of clinical workflows in the country, the amount of time, 2 to 3 hours a day spent checking boxes and clicking things. My game developers, when I was actually in building mobile games at Google, had better technology at their disposal than people who are saving lives in this country and across the world to some extent. And so then this idea that we should actually go alleviate that made sense. But then fundamentally, the only way you can actually make that happen is if you actually are riding or at the cusp of some big significant technology shift. And from a user interaction model perspective, we have had a major shift that's upcoming from desktop to mobile, but from mobile to artificial intelligence design, AI design, or voice, which is one of the ways to look at it. From a technology paradigm perspective, the bringing in of artificial intelligence technology and making them actually useful created another such shift. So the trend of AI combined with this absolute massive problem of clinical burnout, clinician burnout, combined with the idea that finally there was appetite in the market to actually try to solve this problem, meant that a company like Suki could be built. So that was a little bit of like the genesis of how we thought about starting Suki, and here we are.
What insight did you have? Because as far if I'm correct, you started Suki like 7 years ago, before the hype around
Yep.
Gen AI. Now everybody's talking about it, and I know that AI is not new; it's been going on, and Google has been working on AI for a long time. But what insight, in addition to what was going on in healthcare and those shocking facts that you were noticing, what insights did you have
Yeah.
7 years ago about AI that you thought, okay, this is good timing to start something
Yeah.
around AI and Gen AI?
A good SaaS company or any company actually in enterprise world is usually started if you find a really powerful constituency that has a huge issue of some kind of burnout that can be solved by a technical trend. And so if you think about like CRM software, Mark Benioff's insight was that there is a huge powerful constituency which is managers of people, effectively, or salespeople who actually had a huge amount of burnout in managing the data that was actually used to run the business. And the technical insight was the move to cloud. And so, therefore, you put it all together and you have a cloud CRM business. One thing leads to other, and you have Salesforce. So the first thing is in organizing around a powerful constituency, clinicians, doctors, having a huge burnout because of administrative workflow, and the idea that there is a technical trend. The technical trend was the actual practicalization, I would say, like the operationalization of AI technologies. Now, so that's one insight. Second insight is that AI technology is a really broad term. Like there's a lot of things that can be AI in the world, but we had a focus on speech. We said that voice language models, whether a narrow band and now we call them large language models, etc., are going to lead to a place where suddenly these experiences will become much more human-like. And I'll explain that in a minute, what that really means. But the solution set will go from clicking and checking boxes to actually just listening or talking. And that is a huge change in interaction model, which brings me to the third insight, which is that I think that when web-based, desktop-based mobile interfaces turned to mobile-first interfaces, you had a fundamental change because now you could tap and swipe and not just have to click and type. But then when you go from there to voice interfaces, you now don't even have to tap and swipe. You can just talk. And it's much more human to just having to talk and listen than to actually have to type or tap and click things. This interaction model change that's happening creates a significant leap in the amount of the magnitude of data that can be actually shared. So, for example, let's say you were doing this podcast and you decided that you'll send me questions and I'll type. I'll probably send you information. It's going to be a thoughtfully written document, but it's got to be, what it is, as in terms of the content I wrote. But if you convert that into a podcast, which is where we are talking back and forth, now you can see my expressions, you can hear my voice. There is much more flexibility in how we communicate. The amount of information that can go back and forth is quite significant. And so, therefore, the third insight was that the user interaction model changed to AI based design, which means intuitive, without actually being triggered voice related activity, is going to lead to a fundamental reorientation in healthcare tech software. So if you take these three insights, the advent of a clinician that actually is a powerful constituency, has an administrative burden, combined with the advent of AI, the AI that can be built now is actually front and center and can lead to an interaction model change, which will actually ultimately create a huge amount of data exchange that was hitherto not possible. You are talking about a new kind of a product. This product that you're talking about will sit like an assistive layer on top of all of healthcare tech and will help provide data at the right time to the clinician. So, what is that thing that actually sits on top of all of this stuff and actually provides you information all the time or assists you all the time? It's an assistant. And so, an AI assistant for doctors, for clinicians, that represents this assistive layer that sits on top of all of healthcare tech and helps with a lot of activities, starting with administrative burden, suddenly becomes a very, very, very large and powerful company. All of the work Suki has done in the last 7 years is probably 5% of what's possible with this assistive layer that sits on top of it. So that's the journey we are on. And in some ways, people ask me like, hey, this is the sixth or seventh year now. You've been doing at this at a long time. And I'm like, if you spent your entire life doing this, you would still not have made enough impact, because the greatest, most fundamentally significant technology company in the history of humankind is going to be in healthcare. And
I would agree with that.
you don't have that yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Would you consider Suki as a generalist AI platform, or do you think Suki will be eventually, some people talk about horizontal generalist kind of general purpose platforms
Right.
versus very verticalized, specialty focused platforms.
Right.
What do you think? I would imagine that it's a generalist platform, but what do you
Yeah.
think between the
I
two?
think Okay, if you think about an AI platform, what are the pieces that actually make a classical AI platform? First of all, you need to have a normalized data warehouse. Somewhere you can store data and structure it, and it's normalized and it's available for access, input and output in ways that other interfaces can do something with. Then you sit on top of it, you think of basically a suite of models. A model can be anything like a speech recognition system to an intent extractor that understands commands to a voice agent that can switch between dictation and commands to a large language model that actually can do specialized activities. So you have data layer, you have on top of it an AI layer, and then on top of it you have interfaces that other people can build on top of, right? You can have applications that use this. So if you think about Suki, at its core, it's basically a medically tuned AI platform. And medically tuned is important because it's not general purpose, it's for medical purposes. Now, the Suki Assistant, the product that is the tip of the spear of the company that a lot of doctors use and enjoy using, etc., is basically one application that sits on top of this AI platform. It turns out it's our first party application. It's what we built, to showcase what Suki can do. But when Vocera clinical badges, which do clinical communication that nurses do in hospitals, it actually uses, let's say, a Suki platform to actually make a natural command out of things. So that means that Suki is powering a clinical communications device. Or when an Amwell basically uses Suki platform to create the next version of a telehealth product, then Suki is powering telehealth. Too. If Philips builds an image guided therapy product using Suki, then Suki is actually helping power that too. So a platform player which has a front and center assistant, which is the best in class version of that platform manifested in people's hands, then ultimately will also be able to power a lot of experiences, which if you put together, basically do what? They make healthcare tech invisible and assistive so that clinicians can focus on clinical care. That is the mission of the company. That's why we built the company.
All right. So if I'm understanding correctly, your core product, so it's the company's vision. It's an AI platform, and right now, your core product is the Suki AI assistant for admin support. Is that correct? And what are kind of the key features of this core product, and what is the main use case?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Think of it this way. Think of it like this. Imagine that you have Android as the operating system, and then Google builds Pixel devices, which are first party devices that showcase the best of Android. But then all the other companies come about and they can use Android and tweak it in many different ways and build all sorts of devices. Some will build phones like Samsung, Motorola, and others, but there is Android in other specific hardware also, like where you will just use Android and certain aspects of Android to power certain things. And so therefore, if you think about an AI platform, we're building a first party product, which is basically and showcases the product, the platform for clinicians. The skills of that assistant are early on focused on administrative work. So it can do clinical documentation, it can write notes for you, it can answer questions for you, it can code, which is how money is made. So revenue cycle management for you. And it can then over time do patient summarization, order staging, and all sorts of other activities for you. But over time, it might actually start doing things in the realm of what we call classically clinical decision support, where it might actually recommend diagnoses for you or recommend care gaps for you and things like that. And then there is a time it might actually end up in core clinical activities so that doctors can use it while they're doing clinical work too. So this assistant ends up basically becoming a product which, as more and more data and thoughtfulness comes through, more and more skills will keep getting added from administrative work to clinical decision support to ultimately clinical care. That's basically always going to be the primary product of Suki. But the platform has all these different capabilities. these capabilities can be used to power many other companies and many other products. That's where clinical communications or telehealth or all of these other things will come about over time.
Yeah, yeah. That was gonna be my next question. Like, what's on your product pipeline? But you already answered it. And I I am personally very excited about the potential of AI as a clinical decision support tool. Um, but it's a very different game, right? So we are talking about high stakes decisions versus low stakes decisions, and not because it's low stakes it means that it's not important, because we already talked about clinician burnout, so it's super important. But then we know that doctors are not perfect, and sometimes they don't have all the information available in their heads, and so having an AI assistant to support them in clinical decision support and care, it's super exciting and it's super important. So that if that's part of your roadmap and your vision for Suki, what you need other types of data to input the model for clinical decision support, and I would imagine that it's way more complex. So what are some of the considerations that would go
Yeah,
into a clinical decision support process?
right. I think the first thing that's important to kind of push on is basically the idea of an assistant. Some people like to call it co-pilots. We actually call it an assistant. People are like, well, okay, you're building an assistant. Does this mean AI will replace doctors, etc.? And you have to kind of repeat to them, it's an assistant. It's not a doctor. There's a whole kind of streak in the market that says that we're going to basically build a doctor. And I think the better way to think about this is that what was that incident around? Was it Kasparov when he went and played chess against IBM Deep Blue? And then do you remember that
Yes,
one? There was,
yes, yes,
and then
yes,
he
yes.
lost. Deep Blue won, I think. And then there was a press conference, and then people were like, oh, well, it seems like there's going to be no chess anymore. Why do we need chess players? Computers have beaten humans. And he said, yes, the computer has beaten me, but give me a computer and I will beat every computer and every human in the world.
Yes.
And the idea of an assistant paired up with a really thoughtful clinician could fundamentally change healthcare, because between the two of them, they could provide care of the kind that's almost impossible to provide through just an AI or just a human being. And so then the question comes, how do you actually start that journey? Because first of all, to be able to get into the realm of clinical decision support and in the realm of like core clinical activities, you need a lot of data. Where is data created in healthcare? In all the administrative workflows. So the act of actually providing an assistance to the administrative workflows creates the data that's required to actually make the assistant smarter, so it can actually go into clinical decision support. So this virtuous cycle has to kick in. The second thing that's important is that it is very easy today to say that I will deduce some like care gaps and expose some diagnosis that you should probably take a look at and give it to the doctor at the point of care and documentation. However, if you don't actually do a good job, the doctors are going to be annoyed, and it's going to be interruptive and frustrating, and then they will stop using the assistant at all. So to me, the bar is high for not just quality but also timeliness. And if you combine timeliness with quality, you have a thoughtful experience that might actually be truly assistive to the assistant, to the doctor, versus something that just kind of keeps interrupting them and throwing information in their face when they need to. So then you asked me, to summarize, you said, well, okay, how do you get into clinical decision support? What kind of data you need, etc. First of all, you need a lot more data than the data that you have in medical record systems. You're talking about claims data. You're talking about a lot of other sources of data that are not necessarily in the EHR today. There's a lot of companies you can work with to actually procure that. Being able to pull that together into an interface that is not interruptive and exposing that at a time that makes sense to the doctor is actually the higher order problem.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
where you have to spend time.
yeah, and also in addition to the data that you already have in the electronic health records and so on, you also have to integrate molecular data, biometric data. There's ton of data that you have to put together. So
Tons of sources of
tons of
data.
data.
But that's where the normalized clinical data warehouse actually comes into play, because you can pull that together and actually normalize it and have access to the data. But the experience is the higher order.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, before we continue, I think this is a great timing. Jenny, welcome. Jenny is head of marketing, and I asked Jenny to help us do a quick product demo so that people in the audience can actually see how the first product works, the Suki AI assistant. So, Jenny, over to you. You should have a picture and you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for having me on the show. So let me share my screen.
So while she's bringing it up, I think it's worth knowing for your viewers that the assistant is available to clinicians on iOS, on Android, on web, on Chrome extension, in Mac, in Windows. And one of the reasons we have built it like this is because if you know the workflow of a doctor, you know the workflow of exactly one doctor. And in this business, the most difficult thing to do is change management. How do you actually get people to adopt a whole new way of operating? Well, the good way to do that is to, first of all, create a value that's so significant that they will adopt. And then, second, don't make them change a whole lot of things. And so, meeting the doctors exactly where they have to is super critical as a part of that.
Absolutely, and the reason why I'm smiling, Punit, on that comment is, the cultural aspect. It's a huge one. I think adoption, trust, usage, all that stuff, and I'm smiling because over 10 years ago I started one of the first digital health companies in Latin America, and I faced very interesting adoption issues because doctors said, "Oh, I love your technology. It makes total sense. I really want to use it." But then on a daily basis, they struggle to adopt new technologies. They want to do it, but for some reason, a segment of them can be resistant. So I'm really curious about this adoption, how you guys have been overcoming the cultural / adoption thing. Let's talk about that a little bit later. Now that Jenny is.
Can you all see my screen? I'm seeing something weird on my end.
I can see it.
Can you see my iPhone?
Yep.
I can't see anything. Okay. I can just see a white screen.
I see. It says get started with Suki.
Okay, let me try again.
Okay. Well, she. Okay, let's see. Okay. I can see it.
You can see the Suki app. Let's get started with Suki.
Yes, it says get help or chat with us.
Okay, great. I just see a white screen on my end. Should we proceed like this?
If you can do a super quick demo, that would be fine as long as you can follow on your end.
Let me try one other thing. Sorry about this.
Yeah, no worries. Punit, well, okay, I think yeah.
Now I can see it. Yeah. Go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about your target market. What's the difference? Like, who is your target customer or user, and in particular, is your user your customer?
Yeah.
Or are they different?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like in any classic SaaS market, there are three major segments of things that get created. One is basically, enterprise. So, you go after large systems and companies. And then the other is SMB, long tail of SMB. And then you have a platform business where other developers build on top of it. If you're doing enterprise, In our case, that means large, medium size, and small health systems. Then you end up, effectively having to sell to the CMO, CIO, IT, VP, innovation folks. But you actually have to have doctors use the product. So there's always a difference between your user and your customer. In the SMB market, it's a little bit more aligned, though it's super fragmented and painful to sell, in my opinion. And then when you look at the platform market, then it's a developer that you're going after. Suki effectively sells to large, mid-size, and small health systems. Now we have a portion of our business that's driven by SMB, and it's mostly because of the demand. If people come online, we give them a 2-week free trial and they can use the product. But a majority of our revenue and footprint actually is from enterprise. And then we have obviously a pretty large and somewhat recently booming platform business where you have other developers actually using aspects of Suki and building products. And so um, I would say a seminal company in this space, in any SaaS space, usually plays in one and a half of the three segments that I outlined. Almost everyone, if they are really big, they'll play. Suki right now plays in the enterprise and in the platform space. We're kind of there in SMB, but it's a little bit more demand driven rather than us going out and looking for.
Okay. Why did you say that the SMB space is a little bit more painful? Is it because it's more
Big,
fragmented and the
yeah.
CAC, customer
It's
acquisition
the
cost, and
thing
so on?
is like it's more fragmented, and I think the bigger part of fragmented is what? It's actually the electronic medical record. When you have a long tail of random electronic medical record systems that people are using, these systems don't really have the right kind of interfaces that you can push and pull data into. And if you can't push and pull data out of these systems, then how are you going to build an assistant that actually can use the data and do something to help the clinician? So then you end up building like this non-integrated product, which is basically just like in my opinion, creates like it's a gimmick. It creates some content, but not really goes into the medical record system. Then the doctors have to copy paste stuff back and forth. There's a lot of companies actually targeting that. I just don't think it's feasible to build a world-class assistive layer if it does not know how to talk to medical record systems. So our focus has been on the large medical record systems in the market: Athena, Meditech, Epic, Cerner. Many of them end up being in either large groups or group networks or large and health systems. And then we can showcase and highlight Suki for the best of its capabilities. If you are targeting the SMP market, you can build a tool that can actually kind of do some notes and you can copy paste stuff into it. It's fine, but customer acquisition is painful, experience is painful, customer service is painful. So I think it's just a much harder business to go into.
Yeah, yeah. It pros and cons, right? On the other hand, in the enterprise segment, as you've mentioned, you go and sell to the CMOs, the CIOs, and so on. But then the challenge is it's adoption, right?
Oh, yes.
So it's on the SMBs, the providers and the physicians, they want to use it, but they have all of the issues that you just described. But on the enterprise segment, it's a different kind of issue. But from a technological perspective, I think that you're right.
You're exactly right. And effectively, every entrepreneur has to make a choice. And in my opinion, you're smiling because you've made those choices in the past, so I can see it. But the if you are going to go after if you're in healthcare and you're going to go after the enterprise market, which means you're going to sell to health systems, congratulations, you have chosen the hardest go-to-market in history of humankind. It's going to take a long time to get there. You may not get there. On the flip side, if you get to the other side of that, you're done. You're locked and loaded. Adoption actually is a very critical problem, but I think of it as a lesser issue, and I'll tell you why. I think that some people will say it's much harder to convince CIOs and CMIs to buy something. And then once you do that, then adoption is a second order problem. I actually think that if you're building a product that actually really alleviates a significant problem, then you can get the adoption you want because people will have the appetite. It's just about how much of a painkiller did you build, right? To actually do that. versus a vitamin. So to me, like, I think of an adoption as a fundamental problem too, but I think it's solvable through core tenets of product building and principles, where you actually build a really serious painkiller. And like, for example, Steve Jobs said when he was launching iPhone, they were like, people are like, yeah, you think people are going to swipe on a glass screen? That makes no sense. BlackBerry is the thing. Like, who cares about these glass screens? When he had so many apps that it fundamentally changed people's lives, people learned how to swipe on the glass screen. And so it is actually about what a serious problem you're solving, and then you can actually get the adoption you want. Now, SMB, on the other hand, if you want to get $1 million annual recurring revenue business in SMB, you could probably move and do that. But going to 100 million, very, very few companies actually do that. When they do, they're quite amazing, but it's an exception, not the rule.
Yeah. Different approach, different business model.
Yep.
All right, Jenny, are you good with?
Yes, I'm ready. You can see my iPhone. Is that correct?
Yes, I can.
As long as Rodrigo can, but I can't. So it's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so I'm showing Suki on my iPhone. You can do a lot of things by voice with Suki. You can also tap. So I'm just going to navigate to my patient list screen. You can see my patients listed here. For this particular demo, I have set up for a patient coming in for low back pain. And actually, Punit, would you mind being the patient, because Rodrigo's audio is a little bit soft, so I'm not sure if Suki's going to pick it up.
I can be the patient. I'm
Okay,
perennial patient
great.
in this business.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to select my patient, Dan Ford. When I type it, it takes us to the patient profile screen where you can see information like vitals, medications, etc. All of this information is coming in directly from the EHR. So I can tap, or I can say, Suki, show me vitals. It'll pull that information so that the clinician can quickly reference it. And all I'll do to put Suki in listening mode is to press the badge, and then it will start to listen. Mr. Ford, good to see you again. What's bringing you into the office?
I have a really serious back pain. I think I was working out, and I must have stretched something or pulled something. I worry that I have maybe a tear of some kind, but it's really hurting.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. When did this start? How long ago?
It's been about 2 weeks actually. I've kind of like powered through it thinking it'll get better, but it's not gotten better.
Okay. And you said you were at the gym, you were stretching. Were you doing a particular movement that you noticed that caused the pain to come on?
Yeah, I was doing, basically a plank. And then, after that, I started doing one of those exercises where you kind of in a plank, like move left and right sideways. And I think in one of those exercises, I had a little bit of a pain.
Okay,
It
got
wasn't
it.
triggered, but it started feeling like I started feeling hurt.
I see. And can you describe the pain? Is it a sharp pain, a persistent pain? Describe what it feels
It's
like.
a persistent low-grade pain in the lower portion of my back.
Okay. And is it on one particular side of your back or in the middle?
It's right in the middle.
It's right in the middle. And how would you rate the pain on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being no pain, 10 being the worst pain you've ever felt?
It's probably around 4, so it's just a low-grade continuous pain.
Okay. And have you tried anything to alleviate the pain? Anything help make it feel better, whether it's over-the-counter medications, icing,
Yeah, I
heat,
just tried
anything like that?
regular. I did some icing. I used the hot and cold pads, and then I used some Aleve.
Okay. And did that help a little bit?
Yeah, it helped a little bit.
Okay. Have you noticed any other symptoms, any fevers, night sweats, changes to your bowel or bladder movements?
No, not really.
Okay, that's good. Any numbness or tingling?
No, not at all. I mean, I'm not getting any serious disease, am I? I don't feel any of those symptoms, but I just feel like a lower back pain. That's all.
Okay, that's good. That sounds very reassuring. And then last question, are you feeling the pain radiate at all? Is it going up your back or maybe down your legs?
No, not at all. At all. Actually, I had a neighbor once who actually felt that, but not me. I don't think. When I was talking to him, he made me feel a little worried. And then, so therefore, I decided to come here. But I'm happy to talk about my neighbor if you want me to mess up the AI.
Well, let's keep it focused on you because I want to make sure that you're taken care of.
Cool.
Okay, that all sounds very reassuring. I'm going to have you lie down. I'm going to examine your back. So I'm going to press on your spine. The curvature of your spine feels normal. That's good. Are you feeling any tenderness as I press?
No, not really. It's fine.
Okay. I'm going to have you sit up. I'm going to raise each of your legs. Tell me if you feel any pain. So first, I'm going to raise your right leg. Any pain?
Nope.
And then what about your left?
Yeah, I feel a little bit of pain, like 2 out of 10.
Okay, so the straight leg rise on the left is positive. Okay, sounds good. So, I think that what we're seeing here is what we call musculoskeletal low back pain. It's very common. A majority of people, adults, will experience this in their lifetime. I'm not seeing any concerning symptoms at all, so no need to do any x rays or any imaging at this time. These symptoms will typically resolve between 8 and 12 weeks. So you can continue to do icing, heat, Aleve, whatever works for you, continue to do that. I would recommend some light stretching, move as you can tolerate. So some walking, things like that, that will help stretch out your back a little bit. Reasons to come back and see me. If you're not starting to feel better within 8 weeks, come back. If you're feeling any numbness, any weakness, any changes to bowel or bladder movements, definitely come back. We'll want to make sure that you're not experiencing any neurological symptoms. But other than that, I think you should be feeling better in a few weeks. Does that sound reasonable to you?
It's reasonable. I'm a very avid podcaster, so I just want to get back to sitting down and doing podcasts all the time.
Yeah, you're a really busy person and have a big audience, so I know that they have a lot of expectations from you. Okay, sounds good. So now I'm just going to stop the recording by clicking this checkbox. You'll see here I have a few different note types that are set up. These note types can be customized for an individual clinician or at the organizational level, so there's a lot of flexibility there. So I'm going to select my clinic note type. Suki will generate suggestions for each section within the note type. It typically takes 45 to 60 seconds for the note to come back. And then once the note comes back, the clinician will review the content. They'll accept the content that they're happy with. They can reject any content that they're not happy with and make any edits by voice. When the note comes back, I'll also show you how you can easily insert templated content. So any content that you use on a regular basis, you can quickly insert it and then also add codes to the problems. So the note's back. I'm going to click into it. And then you can see the content that's been generated.
Mhm. The history, the physical exam. Yep.
So it captured the physical exam, including the straight leg raise. The vitals were pulled in directly from the EHR, so that's the latest information that we have in the system of record. And then the assessment and plan was also generated based on the conversation. So any content that the clinician is happy with, they can just tap to accept it. They can swipe away any content that they don't like. So, clinicians oftentimes have templates for things like physical exams. So I'm going to swipe that away. And then I'm going to insert my exam. Suki, insert back exam. So that's entered in there. Suki, insert normal review of systems. I've accepted the assessment and plan. Suki, the first problem is lumbar radiculopathy. Suki, insert back pain. Suki, the next problem is prediabetes. Suki, I'm done. And then Suki will prompt the clinician to add diagnosis codes. So I'll just select the ones that are relevant.
Oh, that's nice. That's useful.
And then I can send it to the EHR.
And then does the patient get an email with the assessment and plan?
So what clinicians typically do is they can have a section in their note called patient instructions. Suki will generate the instructions that were discussed as part of the encounter, and then that gets sent to the patient so that they can refer back to what the clinician advised them to do.
Right. Okay. Great. Very good. Very good. This is very, very interesting. Congratulations.
Thank you. So you can imagine that
I guess the patient doesn't get an email because because of patient privacy, they will have to go like a
yeah, and like I mean, it all depends upon how the health system wants to use it. We automatically send it to the patient instructions thing, and then they have it in their application from that they use for the EHR or my charts or anything else that they're using. But on the other hand, you can just print the patient instructions, give it to them. In the future, it's pretty straightforward if the health system wants to get them an email directly with the instructions. We have put it in the right place for them. But I think that the interesting part here is in the time that you and I have spent talking right now, Rodrigo, you can assume about 50 patient encounters across the country have happened, across 100 different specialties where doctors have been using Suki in the room, from cardiology to orthopedics to internal medicine, family practice to ophthalmology to you name it. And every single one of these encounters has to hit a super high bar of accuracy, otherwise you can't use it. So the nature of using the product actually makes the product much better, and that is the power of really a good strong AI platform where actual usage actually creates the kind of power that you want the product to have.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. No, this is great. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much for that. Punit, let me go back to, we were talking about adoption
Yes.
a few minutes ago. So once you close a health system, an enterprise health system, then what's your kind of onboarding plan
Yes.
or activation plan to make sure that you can activate doctors so that they can start adopting and using?
Yeah, I think the focus number one is in making sure that you can integrate the product into the medical record system of the health system. I will tell you this, we, for every one doctor, one engineer I have who does AI, we have two engineers who work on infrastructure and EHR integration and related things. The reason this matters is because unless you actually make it such that it's seamless from a workflow perspective for the clinician, no amount of magical AI is going to actually lead to any adoption. There are competitors in this market, including the incumbent, who actually a lot of times refuse to do a bake-off with us when we are integrated, because when we are integrated, are so magical that there is no way they can win. And so therefore, to me, and on the flip side, I refuse to actually be a part of any health system where I cannot integrate. Now, there are health systems where it's not possible to integrate. So fine, we will actually deploy a non-integrated product there. But for most enterprises, we actually work really hard to get the integration working. Once the integration is done, then we spend a few weeks actually just testing everything, because medical record instances for every health system can be slightly different in tune. Because at the end of the day, when you start deploying to clinical people, you don't want to make sure that you're not testing on them. Everything has to work. Then we take about 30 to 50 doctors, and we provide in some ways white glove at the shoulder kind of training to make sure that there's a cohort of people in the health system who have been well taken care of, have been well set up for success. Once you have that, it spreads. because now you have your peers who actually use the product well. Ultimately, the product itself is relatively easy to use, so therefore you don't really need at the shoulder or white glove onboarding on an ongoing basis. It can just spread. But the fundamental thing that matters to us, I have dashboards inside the office where we look at daily active usage, weekly active usage. We look at engagement rates. We see who actually has gotten beyond 20 clinical notes in a particular period of time, because we know that those people are highly higher, like will adopt. This kind of consumer oriented, almost gamification or mobile app oriented consumer dashboard is how you can actually make sure that you have a steady, solid group of people who are continuously using the product. For me, it is not important to sign an enterprise deal and then have only 30% of people using it. I just get a deal, 30% use it. Who cares? I make money regardless. Actually, you should be incented so that you get paid for the people who use the product. And in this way, I'm actually very incented to make sure that my adoption's as high as possible. Oddly enough, Rodrigo, in this market, in healthcare, that's called fresh thinking. In almost every other market, in consumer markets, etc., the only way companies survive is if people use them. So I focus a lot of energy on making sure that I don't just sell enterprise deals to people, that actually I get the maximum amount of adoption. And anybody who actually like assesses Suki should actually assess us based on adoption rates and not just based on how much money we could create out of deals we did with health systems.
Yeah, no, makes total sense. And also, as I like to say that, especially in SaaS and subscription-based businesses, you really need to be optimizing for having amazing retention.
Yep.
If you make sure that you have great retention, then you can push on growth, on new
Yes.
acquisition, stuff like that. I think that a lot of companies are obsessed with revenue, top line revenue, new acquisitions, and then they say, okay, yeah, I want retention, but they push growth uh, regardless of how good the retention is. So I think it makes total sense to spend a lot of time making sure that once you close one account, that you do an amazing job with that account.
I'll tell you, interestingly enough, we just deployed at a large health system recently, and we were doing a midpoint check to see a couple of months in how they're doing. This is the comment that I got from somebody. They said they will have to pry Suki out of our dead fingers. Like basically, when you get to a place where people love you so much that they will refuse to give up on you, I will have all the retention I need. But if I'm optimizing for contracts and not optimizing for love effectively, then you build a company that might actually have some revenue, but it doesn't create an impact on society.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are approaching the end, almost the end. But before we go, I have a few business questions that I wanted to ask you. And the first one is, some healthcare and health tech executives and entrepreneurs, they tend to make the claim that developing and building the product is the easy part. That really the hard part is distribution, like distribution, selling the product, building relationship with health systems and customers. They say that's the hard part in building a health tech business. Would you agree with that statement?
I don't see the difference between the two. A really good, powerful product serves people and serves it in a way that actually aids retention, leads to better adoption, and inherently creates the kind of mutual benefits for partners that helps with distribution too. So to me, I think that it's a little bit of a simple way of thinking that you can actually build a product that's almost independent. Now, there are companies that just do sales and basically build that stuff. But I think seminal companies don't see a difference between a great product and great distribution funnels and great partnerships. They're all the same.
Yeah. What can you share about Suki's business traction?
So we are in about 250 health systems, groups, and clinics across the country. Based on all the information I have at my disposal, I think outside of the incumbent, which is Nuance, we are the largest by footprint and in revenue in the country at this point of time. We have product and commercial partnership with all the four major EHRs. We have the deepest integration on Epic in the market. We're deployed in places like Mayo and soon Cleveland and Allegheny, Highmark, and Rush and other places are coming. In Cerner, we have the only one who's actually got an integration. In Meditech, we are a preferred AI partner. In Athena, we are a preferred AI partner. Outside of that, from a platform perspective, as we already told you, we power clinical communication tools, we power telehealth. The second largest telehealth platform in the country sits on top of us, etc. So I would say, from a business traction perspective, as an AI platform goes, we are probably the most seminal and fundamental leading company among the startups in this space. There are companies that have been around for a long time, and you should respect their work and respect what they have done. Having said that, it's probably the tip of the iceberg, man. I mean, I'm probably like less than 5% into the potential of what this company can do. And so, yes, we have respect and we have business traction, but it's nothing compared to the work in front of us and the traction that's needed to build probably one of the greater companies in technology.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What have been the most important growth strategies that has helped Suki to get where it is today? What have been the growth strategies or channels or initiatives? What would you say about that? What have been the key learnings in terms of growth?
One has been a deep focus on electronic medical records from an integration and partnership perspective. It's actually very easy to walk into a market and say, what are these EHRs? Who cares? Blah, blah, blah. They're not that good. We should just do what we have to do. That's not true. They actually deal with a lot of complexity that most people don't have to deal with. So respect basically the fact that there is a lot of work they have to do too, and figure out a way to partner and work with them rather than just brushing it aside. So that's number one. That is important. Number two, that's important, is building a really scalable platform. The fact that Suki is actually used in enterprise settings, used by SMB, used by platforms, is because the inherent platform underlying it is just scalable. You can just deploy these things in different ways. And so that has actually led us to being able to take a lot of opportunities that would probably not be available to a lot of people and have a spread that's much broader than the size of the company today. We're punching above our weight, and it's because we have infrastructure that allows us to do that. But most importantly, the fundamental growth lever in the market from me is customer obsession. If you care about your users, if you have a high NPS score, if you can treat them and make sure that you make a difference in their life, if every pixel in the company is focused on making sure the users better, you will win. It's just a matter of when and how long it takes, but you will win. And so therefore, combining really thoughtful ecosystemic relationships, making a scalable platform with a really serious consumer-oriented customer obsession are the three levers that I think grow businesses in this space.
Great, fantastic. That's really, really good. Thank you, Punit, for that. Before we go, I have one personal question.
Yeah.
And then we're done. So, how do you use Gen AI in your daily life? Do you have what are your favorite apps or use cases? How do you use Gen AI today for you?
I mean, to be honest, first of all, my entire company has a whole use case around Gen AI. So obviously, I live and breathe it from perspective. I think these names, when you use them enough, they become like hype cycle names. So therefore, we have to be careful about what we label this stuff at. On a daily basis, the primary place where I probably use it is just Google search. When I'm actually looking for, we're planning a summer vacation with the kids right now, and it's so much easier to actually just have the first Gen AI result come up and quickly look and see if you got some answers before you dig into the results. I think people have underestimated Google's ability, even with all the missteps, to actually do well in this space. And their big engine of search interface is probably going to be it's probably already the biggest driver of Gen AI usage in the market. So that's probably where I spend most of my energy when I'm actually using with a generative AI product.
All right. Thank you, Punit. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to have you on the show. I have learned a lot, and I really appreciate you and appreciate your time. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the questions.
And all the best for Suki. I think you're building an amazing company.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. Take care.